Have you ever played a timed game? Like a game where you had to complete your turn in a certain number of minutes or a certain number of seconds. Like charades, for instance, where you have this list of clues that you're supposed to act out, but you only have a limited amount of time to do that, to act those clues out so that your team can guess those. Maybe it was a game that used an hourglass, a little sand timer like Boggle. You ever played Boggle or Taboo, something like that, where you only have until that time runs out, until the sand runs out to get as many words as you can. Or maybe it was a game with a wind-up timer like Scattergories or Perfection. I don't know if you've played either of those, where you have until the buzzer goes off or the whole board pops up and sends your pieces flying. You have that long to accomplish your goal. Maybe you've taken a timed test, the SAT, the ACT, a timed final exam, an online test. Well, here's what inevitably happens. You start out focused on the objective. If it's a game, you start out focused on guessing the clues, on finding the words, on putting the pieces in the puzzle. If it's a timed test, you start out focused on answering the test questions. You begin with your mind set on the task at hand. But what happens the farther along you go? Your focus gradually shifts from the objective to the timer. You begin to spend more time, more energy, more attention checking on, glancing at, thinking about what is coming, your time running out, and it takes your attention off what you should be doing. That timer seems to move faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. Your mind begins to race. Panic sets in at some point. And then by the end, you are just trying frantically just to do anything, just to put anything down on that sheet, or you've just given up, and then the time runs out. In the end, the countdown has kept you from remembering what your goal is. Our lives operate the same way. We start out focused on whatever thing is right in front of us. This moment, this is all that matters. Now, right, when you're a baby, that's all that matters. Whatever's right in front of you in this moment. But then we get a little older and we realize that there's more than just this moment. There is this day. There's 24 of these hours. Just today. Tomorrow doesn't exist. Tomorrow doesn't even matter. Then you begin to grow and you begin to focus not just on today, not just this day, but now there's 7 of these days, so it's this week. And then there are about 4 of these weeks in this month, and there are 12 of these months in this year. And then we begin to focus not just on this year, but on next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, in the next 25 years. And you reach a point where you begin thinking about the end. And once you start down that mental path, that hourglass seems to move faster and faster and faster. The gap between how you think of yourself and how others see you begins to widen. You know what I'm talking about? Like I think of myself like I'm still 35 years old. But I know that's when I look in the mirror betrays that that's not the case. You know what I'm talking about, right? You think you're younger than you are. And before you know it, you're not thinking anymore about what's around you, the task at hand, your goal, your mission. You become consumed with the prospect of the end, of death. And you never saw it coming. Author Terry Pratchett said, "Inside every old person is a young person wondering what happened." In the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, the preacher, the main speaker in the book, has discovered this very thing. Now, surely he has seen it happen to others, this aging, this advance, this countdown. Maybe he's even experiencing it himself. We don't know exactly who wrote it or exactly how old he was when he wrote it, but maybe he's starting to come to terms with these things himself. But he started off, the preacher in Ecclesiastes started off with this search to discover if there is any meaning, any fulfillment in this life under the sun. And he discovered what he suspected, that it's all vanity. That all of life, everything in this physical world between the time of your birth and the time of your death is a breath. It's fleeting. It's elusive. It's ultimately unsatisfying. While there are certainly joys to be had, life itself is a long, slow march to the grave. Now, our world, our culture doesn't like to admit that. We don't want to acknowledge that reality. We want to either delay aging and death, or maybe even avoid it altogether. I watched a documentary this week about a tech entrepreneur named Brian Johnson. I don't know if you know that name. He's worth about $400 million, 45 years old. He spends $2 million a year on treatments to reverse aging on himself. His entire life, every waking minute is spent on extreme diet, extreme exercise, supplements. He takes 130 pills a day, exposures, injections, blood plasma swaps with his 18-year-old son, gene therapy, where they actually go in and modify your DNA, and all of it in the quest to live forever, to not die. I don't know of anybody in this room who's spending that amount of money on those extreme measures, but we just resort to like cosmetic procedures to look younger, right? Youthful dress to seem younger, youthful behavior to make us feel younger. But really, at the heart of it, it's the same desire. We want to deny the reality and the inevitability of aging and death. But the truth is, death is coming for us all. Well, the preacher reiterates that fact in Ecclesiastes 11, verse 7 through 12, verse 8. But he does so with the assurance that that shouldn't make you despair. We don't have to despair because of that truth. Not all is lost. Not all is hopeless. While our lives here are certainly shaped by the certainty of death, how we face that death and what happens after that death is shaped by what we do in this life. There's something for us to do here and now. Two things, in fact, that prepare us for what comes at the end when the hourglass runs out. So if you would, take a Bible, turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 7, and follow along as I read. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, beginning in verse 7 through chapter 12, verse 8. So the Holy Spirit speaks to us through the preacher when he says this. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. So if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. Remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come, and the years draw near of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men are bent, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the windows are dimmed, and the doors on the street are shut, when the sound of the grinding is low, and one rises up at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of song are brought low. They are afraid also of what is high, and terrors are in the way. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire fails, because man is going to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. Before the silver cord is snapped, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. The preacher begins by acknowledging the joys of youth, the delight of simply being alive. He mentions the pleasure of the sun, the pleasure of light, two things that God spoke into existence. It highlights this idea that God made a good world, and as long as we are able to experience the gifts of it, that is a good thing. It is good for you to enjoy the things that God has made and given to us. But here's the paradox, and maybe you've heard it said this way: youth is wasted on the young. Young people typically don't realize how good they have it while they have it. And I would have put myself into that category 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, had no idea how good I had it while I had it. I probably still don't even appreciate what I have now that I might not have in 10 years or 20 years down the road. When you're young, you have sharp mental faculties. You have good eyesight. You have good hearing. You have agility. You have balance. You have strength. You have dexterity. You have the ability to run and jump and throw and catch and think clearly and remember effectively. And yet, as a young person, you typically take all of those things for granted. I don't know a young person who regularly stops and thinks, man, how amazing is it that I can get out of bed without hurting and read things without putting glasses on and hear what people are saying without having to ask them to repeat themselves, and to be able to remember people's names and bend over to tie my shoes without making awful noises. When you're young, you feel like it's always going to be this way, that you'll live forever. And so the preacher tells the young person, and let me just say here that when he talks about the young or youth, young here is relative, right? Everyone is younger than someone. So when you think of young here, it's anybody who has any capacity to move or think or celebrate or delight. He tells those who have any ability to appreciate and rejoice in the things that you have. Rejoice in what you are. Rejoice in what you do. If you are able to do anything, accomplish anything, if you are in any way physically, mentally, relationally active, make the most out of that opportunity with every ounce of energy you have, with every fiber of your being. He tells the young person, walk in the way of your heart and the side of your eyes. Love the things that God has given you to love, and enjoy the things He has given you to enjoy that are right in front of your eyes. Don't neglect those things. Don't take those things for granted. He commands joy and happiness and delight. Think about that for a second. Usually we think of joy and happiness as feelings, something that we have no control over. Like if I'm feeling joyful, then I'll be joyful. If I'm feeling happy, I'll be happy. He says, no, you rejoice. It's a command. You be happy. You take delight. It's not optional. It is required. To not do that is disobedience. To be surly and grumpy and unappreciative is sin. It's rebellion against God for you not to delight in the good gifts of God. Food and drink and relationships and work and rest and creation. Everything He has given you, enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, you're sinning against God. And in fact, He says God will judge you. Not just if you take that enjoyment too far and cross the line into hedonism and wickedness and sin. Those things are clearly off limits. But you will also be called to account for how much you enjoyed the gifts that God gave you in this life. Let me say that again. You will be called to account for how much you enjoyed the good gifts that God gave you in this life. The way that you show that you have appreciated and grasped the goodness of God you claim to know and love is to delight in the world that He has made. Failure to enjoy that isn't just an oversight. It isn't just a missed opportunity. It is an offense against God. In Deuteronomy 28, God is speaking to the people of Israel, and He's threatening this whole list of curses against them if they break His covenant once He brings them into the promised land. And in verse 47, He specifies, all these curses shall come upon you and pursue you and overtake you till you are destroyed, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord your God. Listen to this. Because you did not serve the Lord your God with joyfulness and gladness of heart because of the abundance of all things. Not just you're going to be cursed if you don't keep the rules, but you're going to be cursed if you don't obey with joy and gladness because of the abundance of all that God gave you. It is a denial of God's covenant blessing when we don't live gladly and joyfully and drink deeply from the well of abundant goodness that God has lavished on us. Has God been good to you? Has God been good to you? How good has God been to you? Abundantly good, right? For you not to recognize and appreciate and rejoice in that is an offense against God. It's what Adam and Eve did in the garden, really. They believed that God was withholding something good from them, and they set out to get it themselves rather than enjoying all that He had given them. And so the preacher tells the young person, really any person with any capacity to enjoy life, to remove vexation from their hearts. Get rid of any worry or fear or anxiety about the future, any worry about that hourglass, any worry about the end. He says, put away pain from your body. Stop complaining about the little aches and pains that you're forced to endure. Don't let them keep you from delighting in your life. We are to live in constant wonder at his daily provision, not constantly feel slighted by God and others, not be grumpy or unthankful. When we don't enjoy and savor and love and delight in the little things, we are headed toward losing our delight in anything at all. So rejoice in youth. Rejoice in the life you have now. Whatever days you have left, rejoice in those. And he says to do this now, before the pains of aging set in, before the reality of time catches up with you, before the sun begins to set on your life, before the curtain starts to drop, before the sand in the hourglass is reduced to those final few grains, before that final countdown hits single digits, before the pleasure of life is gone. He describes this experience in terms of the unmaking of creation. It's a reversing of Genesis chapter 1, where God in Genesis 1 said, "Let there be light." And what happened? There was light. Light came into existence. He says, "Let there be lights to rule the sun and the day." He created, spoke the moon and the sun and the stars, spoke them into existence. Now, the way he describes it in chapter 12, the sun and the moon and the stars go dark. The light goes out. When the rain is finished, the clouds don't clear and give way to blue skies. It's just more dark clouds. There comes a point when all that is light in life begins to fade. Your senses, your memories, your friends, your hopes, your dreams. Injuries and illnesses are no longer just temporary obstacles that you bounce back from. You reach a point where time no longer heals, but it kills. The preacher uses the image of a house falling apart to describe what happens to each of us. A once beautiful home becomes dilapidated and ruined. He says the keepers of the house tremble. He's talking about your hands, the hands that were once strong, that were once trustworthy, that were once capable of protecting and providing and working, now grow weak and shaky. He says the strong men are bent. The legs that once provided a sturdy foundation reach the point where they cannot bear weight anymore. He says the grinders cease. What is that? It's your teeth. He says there comes a point where your teeth fall out so that you can't chew very well. He says those who look through the windows are dimmed. Our eyes fail and our sight is diminished. He says the doors on the street are shut. You shut the doors when you want to dull the noise. Our ears fail. Our hearing is diminished. It's that picture of slow denigration and decline. He describes light sleeping, not being able to sleep very soundly. And early waking, you get up early. He describes a voice that grows weak and raspy. The daughters of song grow low. He describes unsteadiness and a fear of heights, a loss of balance and a fear of falling. He says the almond tree blossoms. You know what happens when an almond tree blossoms? Turns white. He's talking about hair turning white, or in some cases turning loose. He He describes how those who were once agile and spry now hobble and limp along. I was walking in the gym across the street this week, and Paige Davis saw me and she said, "Why are you limping?" To tell you the truth, I didn't even realize I was limping. But my answer would be, because I'm in my 50s. Like, that's what you do when you're in your 50s, you limp. He describes having no appetite for anything. Food, drink, pleasure, people, all your desires just begin to fade. That's the pain of aging. It's the slow decline of growing old. And then at the end of all this decline, there's the reality of death. Always and only death. The light that has been provided by a golden lamp, hanging by a silver cord, precious and valuable, is extinguished when the cord breaks and the bowl falls and breaks and spills out all the oil. The light goes out. The water that had once been held by a pitcher, filled by a pulley at a well, pours out when the pitcher is shattered and the wheel breaks. No more water, no more life. Everything that represented light and life breaks. One day our bodies will wear out and give out. One day our bodies will fully, finally break and life will be over. One day you will come undone. In verse 8, he had said the days of darkness will be many. He's not talking about days of hardship, days of difficulty. He's talking about the days of death. Once you die, you're dead for a long time. And it's a call to remember that. To have an unblinking, sober recognition of death. Let me ask you, how much do you think about your own death? If you're, say, above the age of 65, you probably think about it more now than you used to. How much do you think about your own death? The great American pastor and theologian Jonathan Edwards had this list of 70 resolutions that he was determined to think about and accomplish every week. Resolution number 9 reads, "Resolved to think much on all occasions of my own dying and of the common circumstances which attend death." Every week he made it his purpose, his resolve to think about death. Or British pastor and poet John Donne, who kept a casket in his bedroom as a reminder of his own mortality and the nearness of his death. Now contrast that with Brian Johnson, the millionaire, who, when confronted with death, throws money at it to make it go away. The preacher reminds us that dust returns to earth as it was. Just as Adam, the first man, was formed from the dust of the earth by God, God breathed the breath of life into him in Genesis 2. And then when he sinned and God cursed him, part of the curse was, "By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return." Not you might return, not you probably will return. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. Death is a certain reality. Not only does dust return to the earth, he says the spirit returns to the God who gave it. After death comes the certainty of judgment. After death, we all of us, will stand before God and give an account of what they've done with what God has given us. You will stand before God and give an account of what you have done with what God has given you. When it comes to his good gifts, have you abused those gifts and overindulged to sinful excess? Did you take those gifts and use them in ways that were dishonorable and ways that were not glorifying to God? Or when it comes to those gifts, did you just fail to appreciate them and rejoice in them properly? Have you failed to receive those gifts with a glad and grateful heart? We will be judged both for what we have done, but also for what we have not done. And so, in light of the joys of youth, in light of the pains of aging, in light of the reality of death, in light of the certainty of judgment, we are told to do two things while we can. We saw the first one earlier. We are commanded to rejoice in youth and the light of life. But the second is the command to remember. We have the hope of remembrance. We are called to remember. That doesn't just mean to recall. It means to set one's mind on, to dwell on the reality of something true, something real, something meaningful. We are told to remember. But not just to remember. What are we told to remember? We are commanded to remember your Creator. Not just God, but something specific about God. Set your mind on the fact that God made a good world, not an evil one. We're the ones who are responsible for ruining it when we tried to assert ourselves as creators. The fact is, we are creatures. We did not make anything. We are not in charge of anything. We are not owed anything. Remember that He made and is in charge of everything. Remember back to Ecclesiastes 3, He determines the times and the seasons. Remember also that He is the creator and the sustainer of life. He established that the wages of sin is death. But also remember that God the Son took on human flesh, lived a human life, and died a human death. Jesus willingly submitted to the very thing that we try to avoid. And He did it to pay our penalty for our sin. He died in our place instead of us. But then that death that awaits every person, that death that is a curse for sin, that death that sends every body to dust, He conquered that death by rising from the grave. And He did that so that those who trust in Him could be joined with Him in His victory over death, that we would no longer have to fear the end. We would no longer have to fear that countdown, no longer have to fear the grave. So that judgment that I spoke about just a second ago, that certain judgment will not be just for what you did with your food and drink, with your relationships, with your work and rest, with your attitude toward created things. That judgment ultimately will be based on what you did with Jesus, the one who conquered death and who now offers eternal life. You prepare for that eventual day now, while there's still sand in the hourglass. You see what God has given you now. You rejoice in His gift of salvation now, While you have time and opportunity, set your mind and set your heart on the God who saves. Live now in the light of his goodness. And then once you have received that salvation by faith in the work of Christ, let that salvation prepare you to face aging, to face decline, to face death with hope and confidence and assurance. We've seen over and over again in this journey through the book of Ecclesiastes that life here and now is vanity. It's how he started the book. It's how he ends this passage. Vanity of vanities, breath of breaths, all is vanity. This life is a breath that ends in death. But the life to come will be glorious for those who know Christ. So don't waste this life. Rejoice in it while there's still sand left in the hourglass. But use that time, rejoice in this life to prepare for the next. Amen. If you'll pray with me.